March 22nd, 2022 regular meeting of the City of Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission.
State law establishes planning commissions. This planning commission is comprised of 9 residents appointed to serve our community. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. Other individuals participating in the meeting include representatives of the city's planning department, city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates.
During the meeting, if you wish to address the Planning Commission, please come forward to the lectern when recognized and clearly print your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other device that might disrupt the meeting, please either switch it to the silent mode or turn it off. At this time, I'll ask the Planning Commission Recording Secretary, Kathy Zarnecki, to conduct the roll call.
Mr. Beekner.
Here.
Mr. Faison.
Here.
Mr. Hudson.
Here.
Mr. Krent.
Here.
Mr. Lambert.
Here.
Ms. Malala Holly. Here. Ms. Parakis.
Here.
Mr. Rahman.
Here.
Mr. Tagle. Quorum present, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is
Chair?
the... Yes.
Apologies for interrupting, but after having done roll call, it might be an appropriate time to introduce our new Planning Commission member.
Okay. Mr. Beekner, would you like to introduce yourself as our brand new Planning Commissioner?
Well, my name's Toby Beekner. From Troy. I've lived here for 25 years. I have 3 daughters. I own a business in Troy. And I've been on a couple different sides of the table. But, I'm here to try to help and help my community.
Well, thank you. Welcome to the Planning Commission. Okay, with that then, we'll go on to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, Ms. Parakis makes the motion to approve. Ms. Malala Holly makes a second to approve it. Ready for the roll call on approving the agenda?
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly.
Yes.
Ms. Parakis.
Yes.
Mr. Rahman.
Yes.
Mr. Beekner.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next is approval of the minutes from the March 8th meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from that meeting? Mr. Rahman makes a motion. Mr. Krent seconds it. Any discussion on approval of the minutes? Any corrections? Seeing none, we're ready for the roll call.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly.
Yes.
Ms. Parakis.
Yes.
Mr. Rahman.
Yes.
Mr. Beekner.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next is public comment for items not on the agenda. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak on an item that is not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we will move on to the first item to be considered a plan unit development, potential plan unit development application, a concept plan discussion for the east side of Stevenson Highway, north of 14 Mile, which the address is 750 Stevenson, in Section 35, currently zoned RC Research Center District. And I assume Mr. Carlisle will make the presentation.
Yes, thank you. I have a very, very brief presentation based on the memo that was included in your packet. Tonight before you is a proposed plan unit development for 750 Stevenson. If you notice, you'll see the aerial in front of you. There's already an existing 7-story building on the site. It's approximately a little bit less than an 8-acre site, and it's bounded to the east by I-75. The applicant has submitted a concept plan for a plan unit development. What their plan is to convert the existing 7-story office tower to have the first 2 floors remain as office, and floors 3 through 7 to be converted to indoor self-storage. In addition, just north of that, they propose a 80,000 square feet, 1-story building that will be office/industrial uses. And then the third thing they want to do is they want to add a new plus or minus 10,000 square foot, 1-story brewery with tap room. That would be, again, adjacent to I-75. As for zoning, the site is zoned RC Research Center. And the research center name and the intent, it kind of is very similar to what the name is of itself as research center. Used for industrial research and office uses. However, it does encourage development of uses and services that will support and enhance the office environment in the RC district, primarily for the benefits of tenants and local residents. However, the RC zoning does not allow self-storage and a brewery/tap room. That is the reason why the applicant is trying to go through the planned unit development process. Mini warehousing and self-storage is a permitted use in the IB, a permitted use and a special use in the GB and general business district. Brewery and tap room is a permitted use in the IB, general business district, and the CB commercial district. So that is the reason they're asking for the relief, is to allow for those two uses on the site which are not permitted under the underlying RC district. We do note that if a site plan is submitted as part of this, if this moves forward, there may be some additional relief that would be reviewed and requested through the site plan review process. We haven't got to that point yet because we have not seen a detailed site plan. Just a few renderings of the site. This, if you see behind you, this is a 7-story office building. Again, the first 2 floors remain office. The remaining upper floors will become self-storage. This is the proposed brewery tap room, and this is the 8,000 square foot research office building. This is Stevenson on the backside, so this is actually looking at the site from I-75. Again, I-75, looking from the I-75 in the site. Again, the tap room, existing tower, and the 8,000 square foot building. And this is a view at ground level as to how the buildings would kind of all complement with each other. So they're Planning Commission is asked to consider the application, provide feedback to the applicant as they move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle? I just have actually 2 brief questions, and it might involve both of you. The first one is, we received a request from one of our commissioners who's not able to be here tonight that suggested moving the brewery so it was in a perpendicular to 75. If that were to be done, and I don't know if the petitioner wants to do that or not, but would there be any considerations as far as making sure that that would not affect drivers on I-75?
Well, in terms of drivers, the only impact that we would consider that would be, light spillage. My belief, and the applicant can explain this in more detail, is I believe it's parallel to 75, so they can get the most visibility from 75, and so that's why they've had the elongated section parallel to 75. In addition, if you turn it perpendicular, there might not be enough space for circulation and other reasoning. So that's my assumption as to why it's parallel to 75, but I'll leave it up to the applicant to go into more detail about that.
Thank you. And I guess this might be more for Mr. Savinet. Talking about the history of the RC zoning district, is there a particular reason why it's so restrictive in that it only allows certain uses?
Yeah, I think the RC district is kind of a carryover. It's been in existence a long time, and I think if you go and visit this area, you drive around, you'll notice it has kind of a campus-type feel to it. The architectural style is somewhat similar, and it's the trees and the open space gives it like I said, like campus-type feel. And I think the intent was to create like a research center type district, and this was decades ago. And I think for the most part it's working pretty well. But I think we would agree that recently, there's businesses and property owners in this area that are looking maybe to add some more amenities, some places for people to maybe to eat and drink, and maybe do some basic shopping, drugstores, things like that. Because it reminds me when I first started working here 20 years ago. If I wanted a sandwich, I had to get in my car and drive to some place that now I can walk on the other side of the bridge and get a sandwich. And I think that what they're proposing, at least from the microbrewery aspect, is an amenity for some of the workers that live there, because I think around 5 o'clock the lights get turned off in this area, and that, it could be more of a 24-hour type place. I think that's what, based on the conversation we had informally, that's kind of, I think, what they're going for.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Rahman. Oh, I
Okay.
recognize you.
The one-story building that we are having the proposal, what will be inside? Do you have any idea, or?
I don't know if we know at this point. I'm not sure that they know at this point. It's just simply a concept plan to show how the site would lay out if they did proceed with the site plan. I'm not sure they've identified an actual user for that, again, that 8,001 square foot building. They did say it's going to be research or light industrial uses, though.
So maybe it's not relevant, but is there any regulation within the city ordinance that you cannot do certain things like smoke chimney or some other things that more crude type industrial use than just a testing center maybe?
So we would, when we evaluate the planned unit development, we would look at the underlying zone, which is RC. So we look at those uses that are allowed in RC and consider that uses. RC doesn't allow those types of heavy manufacturing uses that you're talking about. So there'll be some point of discussion as part of the planned unit development. In addition, a lot of those smokestacks and other things you're talking about are regulated by the state, not necessarily regulated locally. But we should have an understanding from the applicant, if they move forward to the planned unit development, what the actual use of that building is going to be.
Okay. Yeah, because if it's just small labs, those kind of work, then it's probably no big deal, more relevant to the research activities going on. But if it is related to metal forming or metal shaping type work, which is more hardcore, I don't know if that will be appropriate for that place. Okay, thank you.
So I jump in. So the range of uses permitted in RC is somewhat narrow. It's restricted to research, prototype development, office support, those types of uses. So it's very narrow. There's been times where someone has reached out to us and said, I've got interest in property in the RC district. I want to put up, an industrial building. And we've got to be very clear on what type of industrial building. Is it going to be used for prototypes and research, or is it going to be assembly line type stuff?
Right.
If it's an assembly line type use, that's approved in IB. That's not permitted in RC.
Yeah, because as far as I know, that when you become a PUD, then a lot of things are kind of beyond question. So I don't know if RC laws can be applied to the PUD. That's my worry, So
with the PUD, everything is negotiated.
Right. Okay.
Everything is negotiated. Height, density, use, setbacks, parking, everything.
So we'll have some discussion at one point.
So your job as a planning commission member is to provide input, because this is a negotiated process, and your opinion as a planning commission very much matters.
Okay, thank you.
We're more used to conditional rezonings where everything has to be volunteered, and we can't have the back and forth. With PUDs, we can have back and forth. It's part of the process.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Faison. I'm sorry, Mr. Krant. Okay, go ahead.
I realize this is a concept at this point, but I see no places to park vehicles. Is there an intent to put vehicles on this property at some point?
Yeah, again, this is a rendering, a concept. My understanding is the areas that are grayed out there, the light gray, that is parking areas. So the buildings themselves are these darker gray blocks. The area outside that is parking. And obviously, Mr. Krent, when we get a site plan, we confirm that parking is sufficient. They meet the required parking.
Good, thanks.
Okay, Mr. Faison.
I was just curious and maybe this is for the applicant, but is this going to be a cohesive project, or is it going to be three separate buildings? So will there be consistency in materials and connectivity and things like that?
It's certainly a good point, and certainly a point that we would discuss as part of the PUD process. We want to ensure that there is some architectural integrity as well as some building consistency as well. In terms of physically, they appear to be three physically separate buildings. There's no connection to that. In terms of phasing, too, I'm not sure what the phasing of the three buildings would be. But in terms of approvals, yes, there should be consistency with architecture, materials, et cetera.
Okay, and the question, well, I'll continue. The question I had was the expectation that when you look at the site and it's completed, it's a cohesive site? I know the buildings are going to be separate. I didn't know if that was the intent, or are they going to be just three different buildings, different uses, and not any kind of connection between them beyond they're on the same site.
Well, I mean, that's part of the discussion that we would have with the applicant to ensure that there is consistency and continuity between all three buildings, that they're not three separate entities just happen to be on one site. Because this is one site there, so there will have to shared issues of shared parking, shared access, shared utilities, easements and such. And so as part of this discussion, we need to talk about that continuity, making sure that there is consistency between all the elements on the site. And so they're not just three separate buildings on one single parcel.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yep.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Thank you. So the building number 1 is already there. It's existing. It's the 7-story building. And that is, if I'm correct, when I drove by that area yesterday, it's somewhat like a grayish color building, 7-story tall, right? So now we are looking at obviously a conformity, and thank you for bringing that point, Mr. Faison, the conformity of all the other buildings to the existing one, which is probably, 20, 25 years old building that is standing in that location, right? That was my concern too, in terms of conformity. And second, as of course, the proposal, they will be able to probably give us more idea on this, but the way right now the location is of the brewery and the park or visible open space on the other side, there is no connection between those areas, so no pathway connection, something that says that this is one whole chunk of development. So
yeah, and it's again, we're looking at a very concept plan. We haven't seen landscaping. They're just kind of graying out parking areas, so we don't know where the sidewalks are, the sidewalk connections. So this is a really, really, really rough sketch at this point to make any sort of determination on the kind of level of detail that we're talking about in some respects. With regards to the facade, the applicant hasn't told us whether or not they're going to be doing any facade improvements to the existing building. So that might be an opportunity to make improvements to the existing building and have those blend into the two future buildings moving forward. That should certainly be a point of discussion with the applicant.
that's a good point. Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Biegner?
Just a couple points that I see. I drove by it today. I'm familiar with that area from here. That needs to be updated, in my opinion. The building's a bit of an eyesore. I'd love to see them improve that building a touch. Obviously, those are up to the details. I get that this is a rendering. My other opinion is the brewery would be down low and I-75 is up higher, so I don't think that would be an obstruction from one person's opinion. I'm nervous about parking, as was mentioned. I've dealt with parking before, and you don't want to be low on parking. Green space is another question. We all know they've got things they've got to meet, but I find it very interesting to see how that would go. I look forward to see more renderings.
For those that weren't able to get out there and look at the site, you'll notice this is what's there today. 7-story building with a lot of asphalt surrounding it, just for what it's worth. Now, there may be, and the owner is here, there may be some shared parking agreements with other properties that would also lend to more flexibility in terms of shared parking, but it's going to have to park.
Any more questions for staff? If not, we'll invite the petitioner up to speak to us and make a presentation, and be sure to sign in on the sign-in sheet as well.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. My name is Joe Latozis with Design House Architecture, 3300 Auburn Road, Auburn Hills. Joined by Mike Pizzola. Let me get the tall mic here. Joined by Mike Pizzola, also from Design House Architecture, and Steve Calabat, the owner. So tonight we bring in front of you kind of a reuse of an existing building and some increased uses onto that site. We're excited to have this possibility. We're excited when Steve brought this to us to kind of explore the different options that we may have with this project. So the idea was to take the existing building, utilize 2 of the floors as office, and then utilize the rest of the floors as climate-controlled self-storage. Climate-controlled self-storage is increasingly becoming more and more needed as I know office space becomes more and more expensive. It's kind of hard to have, 1,000 square feet of closets when it's costing as much as it does. So having storage relatively close to your location, whether it be your house or your office or whatever your work environment is, becomes a nice amenity or an accessory to have in that area. And then with the parking requirements, or reduced parking requirements from reducing the 5 floors to storage, we see the opportunity to reuse some of the existing parking areas in these new uses. Understanding the RC zoning and the future master planning for this, this technology park area. Having this 80,000 square foot kind of spec industrial warehouse flex kind of building opens up a bunch of opportunities to different companies to come in and utilize it, whether it's split into multiple different tenants or if it's one large tenant. We don't necessarily know right now, but it's kind of our idea. And then the brewery tap room, I think is a nice amenity for the area, for office workers or whomever to come and enjoy, create some increased green space, kind of reduce the asphalt in the area and kind of bring this little node of interest kind of to that end. So to answer some of your questions and comments that were brought up, I think we touched on the one-story building a little bit. Everything, we will definitely work with staff and meet the parking requirements as much as possible. There will be a shared, a shared parking component to this within the different buildings on site. The hours of the brewery, when people come to that, is different than the hours of an office, which could be different than the hours of what the one-story building is. So we'll definitely meet any and all parking requirements. We definitely want to have a cohesive design, both within the site and within the area. So as staff said, this whole area has this kind of campus feel, right? We don't want to impose any new ideas to that. We want to continue that idea, continue that feeling, and make this a part of that whole thing. So if it's, pathways and connections to other sites, green space that, allows use, public pathways, we want to include all of that as part of the PUD. The design, the uses, the landscaping, everything. We want to keep the nature of this area and follow the existing planning and the master planning as much as possible, while still providing these new kind of amenity accessory uses. So as far as exactly what the buildings look like, we don't quite know yet. We don't know what improvements we're going to do to the existing building quite yet. We just kind of wanted to come in front of you, give you our idea and kind of our 10,000 foot view of what this project is, what Steve's been dreaming of, and kind of get your thoughts on it, and so we can implement those as we move forward in the process. So we're here to answer any questions you have or hear any ideas you have, and we're all ears.
Great, thank you. I know Ms. Parakis has it. I'll go to Mr. Savidan first, then I'll go back to you.
I want to make sure we're all speaking the same language. And I guess I'd like a little bit more information on the climate-controlled storage. Like, what type of a customer is it going to be? Am I going to be taking the beer bottle collection I started in college and storing it there, or is it going to be like file storage for offices in the area? And like, what type of a person is going to be using that facility?
So this will be geared more towards file storage, office, commercial uses. So it's not going to be the lawn maintenance crew. It's not going to be your beer bottle collection. We anticipate this being more corporate storage.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, do you find, like, what's the genesis of this idea? Is there a, do you believe there's a market need for this type of file storage? You know, is the typical user going to be from this area? Like, can you shed a little bit more light on that?
Hello, Stephen Calvat. I'm part of the ownership group. So we have a market study relating to the demand for storage, self-storage, climate-controlled storage, and there was definitely a lot of demand in the area. And conversely, there was almost no demand for office. And just to give you a little bit of the genesis of this property, we acquired the property in mid-2019. We bought it, it was virtually empty. I would say it was maybe 10, 12% occupancy. But we're pretty good at finding properties and spending a little bit of money, on new infrastructure, cleaning up the interiors, redoing the parking lot. We bought this and we spent about 4 or 5 months and spent about $2.5 million. We did new lobbies, new mechanicals, new parking lot. The parking lot's, I mean, it's oceans and ocean of parking lot, and it's virtually unused. And then, of course, we started talking to some tenants towards the end of 19 and early 20, and then we know what happened then. And we've honestly been sitting here for 2.5 years with a 100% empty building now. We have no takers. There's no velocity in the market. We own other office buildings and other industrial in the area. The research is doing very, very well. Thankfully, we at 1650 and at 500, we're doing okay. We're holding our own, but this one is 100% empty. And we would not be undergoing such a drastic change to this particular use if we didn't, A, think we needed to, just for survival, and B, if there wasn't any demand for it. So that is the general idea here. In a perfect world, we would be renting this out as office. We wouldn't be going through all this. I mean, that's just the reality that we're in right now. So we're going to sort of have to spend money to get ourselves out of this right now. There's a tremendous demand for this warehouse. There's tremendous demand. There's good demand. I won't say tremendous for the self-storage, climate controlled specifically, and and we're hoping that we can offer the brew house as an amenity. There will be plenty of parking. One of the good things about the self-storage is the parking requirements are minimal. I mean, they're like one park for every 5,000 square feet or 10,000.
So on an average day, 3 to 10 visits.
3 to 10 visits a day, plus whomever's working there. So there's all kinds of space that is going to be underutilized in that parking lot. And then the restaurant will predominantly be in the evenings. Most of the restaurants in this area have light lunch business, but then, around 5 or 6 o'clock, and of course the weekends, which I'm sure the rest of this park will be empty. So we're not really worried about parking. We'll make sure that it works to everybody's satisfaction. And if it's okay with you, I know you're the designer, but I'll address a little bit on the design side. We're happy to make this as cohesive as possible to satisfy planning. I would argue that the tap room, the brew house, depending on who comes, they may want to have their own fixtures, their own artwork, their own materials. It would probably be its own distinctive look and own distinctive, architecture. And it will probably stand out, I will say that. But we would, of course, try to, make the materials of the warehouse and the self-storage work together as much as possible. So if you have any questions for me, I'm still here.
Okay, let me ask Ms. Parakis first.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for being here, both of you. It was very helpful. In fact, a lot of my questions have been answered about the storage. Originally, I had wondered what the impetus was for the storage, whether there was an actual need or if it was more just a cheaper option than having empty office space, which probably requires a larger expense. So I wouldn't want that to be the reason we're doing storage. I also would agree with you that I don't necessarily see any reason that you need to make a cohesive campus. I think the tap room is a completely separate entity, and I think it should take on its own characteristics. Having said that, I'm having a problem because I feel that the buildings really have nothing to do with each other. I love the idea of the brewery, and I think it's appropriate in that location, so I would be fine with that. And if you're telling us that there's a tremendous need for that, or you have interest in that warehouse development, that also is fine to me. I think my biggest concern is the existing 7-story building and turning that into storage, which sounds like there might be interest, but I'm wondering if you can't bring something there that would complement the area a little bit better. I don't know if you thought about converting it to residential loft, something more industrial, putting retail on the bottom instead of office since you can't fill it with office. But it seems to me that you're basically just going to have a 7-story building that's empty.
Our first instinct was multifamily, actually. And we did our own analysis on what it would cost to convert this building versus what kind of rents we think we can get there, especially the fact that this building is kind of its own little island and there's really no other multifamily near there. So what is really what is the demand there? We didn't feel that it was a good fit for this particular site. Retail won't work here on the first floors because it's too far away from Stevenson. So you have to have frontage right on the road or they just won't come. And we own a lot of retail in the area, and this would just die. It would die immediately. So we've considered definitely the multifamily, and maybe at some point I might dust that off again and look at the analysis. We looked at the analysis about a year ago. Multifamily has gotten more vibrant in the last year. We do know that, but it's just residential sitting with no other residential around it, and that's what scares us.
What about something like an extended stay type place for corporate type?
Well, they're already overbuilt with the hotels on Stevenson now.
Okay.
So we did a hotel study too, and there are 4 new flags that have opened in the last year and a half. So they're just.
Okay.
We thought about a hotel, and we've got some hotel assets as well, and that was a big no.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to. Trust me, I would love to. Climate-controlled storage was not at the top of our list because we're not really in that business, to be perfectly candid with you. So we would probably, defer to a management, one of these big national guys to come in and basically take it from us. But we did look at the study, and the study is pretty clear that there's definitely demand. So, and we're underserved. And we're underserved specifically in climate controlled. And in that corridor, there are a whole host of corporate clients who would definitely love to see that there. Do I want to convert a 7-story office building, something we just acquired and spent a lot of money on, to climate controlled? I'm literally going to be demoing all the stuff we just put in there, so that pains me, but that's what we came up with. So.
Okay, that's interesting.
Mr. Rahman.
Yeah, I actually have a couple of questions. So the first one is just
broadly, are you going to make any external change?
Sorry?
Are you going to make any change externally, like outside? The building looks pretty uniform, pretty nice. I know it's so old-fashioned, it's an old building, but yeah, I feel like it still looks pretty nice and modern. So my question is, are you planning to do anything that would stick out, like an air handling unit or something that's outside of the structure?
I don't know that we're going to do anything much more to the design of the 7-story building. It's really too early to tell you right now. But given the use, I don't know what more we would do except, the artwork that would be expected by one of these big, public storage or self-storage or whatever they have, and maybe we would modify it according to that.
So do you think that it's just maybe asking the question a little bit differently? So those storage places, orange color, 1-800 self-storage, are you planning to make something like that, or it'll be different usage?
Well, again, it's going to be up to whomever our ultimate user is going to be. We won't be managing it, so whomever the management company will be, then we'll utilize all of their fixtures and their, emblems and logos and colors and whatever. So, more than likely. I mean, to the extent that the planning allows us to, of course.
Okay.
Yes.
And then maybe another question is, but I think you probably answered my question, is like in case we see that when we are all going back to work, do you think that there will be a provision to, convert those back to office space, or it will be permanent damage to the...
I believe by virtue of the PUD, we'll have certain uses that are allowable and not allowed at this site and at these premises. So I defer to Mr. Sabina.
So what I was going to ask when everyone else was done was, my thought was, if it's converted to if this goes forward in terms of use, and it's converted floors 3 through 7 to self-storage, and the market changes, and the office market's booming, converted back to office, or the residential market, calls for this to be converted to residential. We can, in the PUD agreement, can put verbiage in there to allow for that type of flexibility.
Yeah, I think we should, because you don't know what will be the market situation right away. So.
And frankly, we would love the flexibility. So to the extent that that's available, that would be great.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. With a question down here, Mr. Hudson.
I saw this proposal, and I was looking at the standards for PUDs, and warehouse just jarred me. That it was just, I didn't think it was a good piece for a puzzle in this area. To my knowledge, I may be deficit, I think we've got at least 3 public storages, 5 stories in height, already in Troy. You're proposing a 5-storage warehouse, 2 floors above the ground. And I'm just having a hard time with that concept. I know it's tough to fill vacant space, but there's got to be a more imaginative use for those 5 floors than storage. I notice as part of the standards, they almost sort of encourage a complementary variety of housing types in a PUD. And I think most of the PUDs, to my knowledge, have at least had some touch of housing in it. And I think Ms. Parakis' observation on multifamily would fit in beautifully there, but I'm having difficulty with that. I just want you to know.
I think you're exactly right. Again, that was our first impulse. We thought about multifamily. The multifamily market is so hot, but after we did our analysis and we did our study, it just didn't make sense in this particular location. Whereas, we have a paid study that shows that there actually is demand for self-storage.
We got a lot of paid studies too when hotels were coming into Troy.
Yeah.
You get what you pay for, hopefully.
Well,
and I'm sure you didn't
right.
get a study that says, no, it's not any good, throw it aside and get somebody else to do one. But
in fairness, there's nothing on the Stevenson corridor in self-storage.
I remember that was an airport.
Sorry?
A runway. That was a runway for an airport years ago.
Right.
But 5 stories with the 5 top stories being storage, just it doesn't fit well with me. I want you to know that.
Mr. Beekner.
I'm the new guy on the block, and I respect everybody here. I'm from here. I've done my homework. I like everything you're saying. Self-storage is full. It's needed. I've done my homework on it. I worked in automotive engineering for 16 years. I've worked in that area. The warehousing, there's a need for it. I don't drink. My wife doesn't drink, but there's a need for that. I've had a lot of customers, friends, family say that would go in a good way. I agree that the 2 stories below, I'm not sure what I would do with that. I love that office space, guys, has been going the wrong direction for a long time. There's a 25% vacancy for office spaces. To get rid of some of that, I think is smart. I love the idea of multifamily. That's not the right place for it. It's right next to I-75. It's off of Stevenson. That's just my, I don't have a question to ask. I'm excited to see what you bring to the table because I like where you're going here.
One of the reasons for the 1 and 2 stories, from my understanding, is first and second story of office, we remodeled those, spent a lot of money on those, but putting that aside, there's a certain size that's a sweet spot for this storage, and we exceed that with the 7 stories, so we would just do 5 stories instead of 7.
You're gonna fill it.
Yeah, let's hope so. Yeah.
My opinion.
That's our understanding. And, we've got these companies that are all
There's a need
looking
for
at
it.
us, so, yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly.
Thank you. I had 2 quick questions. One comment and one question, actually. The comment is, I'm not a big fan of self-storage, but we've heard your answers on that, so I'm not going to beat around that. I don't think it's a multifamily space myself, personally speaking. It's very industrial, very business area, according to me. But will the brewery be visible from Stevenson Highway as it sits close to 75? And how will they attract people into that area, because the building is so tall and so visible from Stevenson Highway, which is the route that people will take to get into the brewery. As it sits, it's lower than the 7-story building. What are you envisioning here?
I highly doubt anybody's going to be able to see it from Stevenson, so there will need to be some signage. It will need to be a destination, and I think by virtue of its location on I-75, I hope people know it's there, and that's, there are other many other examples of restaurants which are very difficult to access, but they've got the visibility on the freeway, and in this case, that's what they'll probably be seeking. In a perfect world, they'd have visibility on both roads and really good access. In this case, they're going to miss one of them for sure. So, and I don't know if you want to add anything to that. But,
No, that's exactly what I was.
Okay, Mr. Faison.
You may have touched on this before, but I just want to ask, when you look, if this is approved and you develop the building as you're suggesting, 2 stories of office and 5 stories of the storage, when you look at the building from the exterior, will it look like a 7-story storage building? Will it look like an office building? Like, I'm trying to understand the optics of.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't have a good answer for you today. I think that we're still early in that design process, and I think some of that is going to be determined by whomever our user is going to be for that space, to whatever extent that. But what I've seen, just more anecdotally, I've seen where when you see the windows on the outside, they typically have hallways on the interior of the building, but on the where the windows are, and then you can see the doors going into the various units. That's what I think I'm going to see here at ours. But the final design is really not going to be up to us. It's going to be up to the user.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Carlisle.
And go ahead. Yeah.
Add one quick thing so I do a lot of self-storage nationally, and there's a giant movement to make these storage buildings more attractive and look more like office and high-end residential, actually. So, the days of the drive-up buildings with all the doors on it are kind of going away. Like these big companies want these big, impressive, shiny buildings that look and fit in contextually to their neighbors and not be this, ugly thing with fake roll-up doors on the side of it. So I anticipate any of the big guys that come in here, or, big companies that come in here to manage this are, one, it's gonna keep the bones of an office building, and there won't be any fake sliding doors on the outside. There may be, a recessed, the corridor of doors 5 feet in from the windows that you can maybe see at night, but that would probably be the extent of any storage, typical, classical storage building appearance.
That's helpful, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Carla.
Yeah, I had two questions, and Mr. Faison hit on one of them, so I'll just follow. I want to follow up to Ms. Mulholly's question. Did you consider about putting and I wish I would have asked this when we had a pre-application, the brewery or restaurant as part of the first floor of your existing building?
I can try to answer it.
The reason I ask is, talk about visibility. If you put it here, you get visibility both, so the straight away from Stevenson, and you still get 75, and you then free up this area in the future if you want to redevelop it
Yeah,
for
so
other
it's
purposes.
the brewery component of the puzzle is the one that, requires this additional height.
Couldn't you take the two of the stories on
Yeah.
part of the building, half the building?
Right, we could cut a hole in your floor. And, yeah, so it's definitely a great suggestion, and we'll definitely take a look at it. I love the idea of being visible from Stevenson. I think we were just thinking that, we get this standalone building that can be its own, whatever it wants to be, and we can build it so that it meets all the requirements of whatever's doing there. But yeah, that's.
And I'll just throw in my 2 cents, and I'm very much in favor of that. If we can accomplish that, it's our experience with restaurants. They all want freestanding restaurants, and if you look around town to any mall or on Big Beaver, the full service restaurants, their choice is to be freestanding. They want to have their own little island, and they want to have their own parking around it, and they want to have their own distinctive, whatever. So, and I know with breweries, correct me if I'm wrong, don't they have certain stacks that go up, and then they have, what's the room where they take the wheat or the barley or whatever it is, and there's a stack there's a what do you call those tall?
Mr. Savino, what's it called? Since you're the beer expert.
There's brew kettles, there's fermenters.
No, I'm not talking about the metal. I'm talking about outside. They have those silos.
Mm-hmm.
They have those silos that they have to store all the stuff in, typically, and those are typically outside, from what I understand as well. But I'm no expert.
Well, look, I'm not an expert, but I think you see all kinds. I think you see standalone, you see first floor of a multi-story building, you see big ones, you see small ones. There's a range.
In a perfect world, if we can incorporate it in the building, absolutely, I would love to. So, but we don't know that.
Mr. Rahman, you had another question?
Yes, it's related to Mr. Tagel's point that he tries to rotate the building by 90 degrees. So I feel like, I know that there is an intention to show all these 3 tanks. What do you call it, tanks? Like for the beer, to represent that it's a brewery that will attract people. That was intentional, I understand that. But it's probably too much. You don't need to show all 3 of them. So I'm just saying that, can we rotate it and maybe change the shape so that we can show the green space and connect the whole community as a one unit? Like, yeah, right. Because my understanding is maybe it's not finalized yet, right?
I think that I'm just visualizing it myself. If you turned it 90 degrees, the flow for you've got the flow for the trucks that are going to go inevitably to the warehouse. You got to deal with that, and then there's going to be another set of traffic that are going to want to use the.
I was just driving in the parking lot like 2 hours ago. It was huge. I don't think that I worry about that. There's plenty of space, there. So that way, it would be more integrated. Like, the 1 story, the main area, and then in between, in the middle, the green space. I think that would be something I would be interested in. And if you want to show those tanks, one would be good enough, transparent tanks, so that you can see from the side, because you don't have that much of elevation. So I think that would be something interesting.
I'm speaking out loud. But
Okay.
maybe what happens is if it ends up in the building, then we just simply build out from it, maybe 30 or 40 feet, and then you just go up 25 feet, and then that'll be your display area for all the installations or whatever. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out. Spitballing, I don't know.
Mr. Krent, I know you had a question. So.
Just a quick comment. As a planning commission, we always look forward in time. So what's going to happen next? What happens? What's the uses in the next 20, 30, 40 years? And I think the storage unit's ideal because people are working out of their homes. They're not going to go back. So we've got all this these corporate offices, and they're paying high rents for a corporate office. Now they can have a reduced rent for all the stuff, all those records, all those files. It makes a lot of sense to me as what comes next in the future. It's going to be buildings full of stuff and people working out of their home.
Right, agreed. And quite frankly, the first and second floors, we are thinking that those might be, what's the we word?
Eventually.
Shared office as well, so that people could sort of, go in and out of there if they want to, and if they need to store anything, the records are upstairs or whatever. So it'll be more, more mobile, for sure.
Okay. Ms. Parakis.
Yeah, I mean, you just touched on it. One of the ideas would have been to do what you're saying. I know sometimes attorneys now, for example, who are working at home need to meet a client and they need a nice office, so they rent a space by the hour or however they do it. So that's another idea. I will say that after hearing what you said about the the storage, I've come around. I think I'd be fine with it, but I believe that we would need to put parameters on it, visually speaking. What I think would be unacceptable for me is the bright orange public storage building with the gates.
Sure.
But if you're telling me that it can be done not discreetly, but in a way where, you're not driving by and it looks like a storage facility, it looks like an office, no one's going to take a second look at it, maybe tinted windows or whatever. But I would be willing to consider that if you're telling me there's a need, which I believe there must be if you're willing to do this. So I think it could work, but we'd have to give you guidelines on what would be permitted and what wouldn't.
Absolutely. And by the way, we would still have to spend quite a bit of money just to convert this to self-storage for whatever it's worth. There's the floors do not support the kind of load that is required there. So we're going to have to re-engineer all the flooring and columns and everything like that to support this thing. So it's not just put a sign up and we're ready, we're in business. We're going to be spending some money. More, it's more, hopefully it's not more good money after bad, but we'll see what happens here.
Yes, Ms. Malalawi.
I guess one of the things that I am I'm still iffy about is on Rochester Road, there's a huge self-storage, which is quite an ugly eyesore, to be honest. And if nothing like that is what you're proposing, then I think it'll be fairly okay.
This will be very tasteful. Again, it's going to maintain the integrity of an office building.
Correct.
So just by virtue of that, all the gray structure that's there, and I mean, you won't find that in today's construction in any self-storage. Those things are built kind of cheaply, but this will not be. Just by virtue of the fact that it's an office building, will hopefully speak volumes. We're not going to change that. We don't have the budget for that.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Any other? Yes, Mr. Savage.
Yeah, not to just keep piggybacking on the storage issue, but I think there's a significant difference between a 7-story building where the first 2 stories are dedicated to office, and then the next 5 is a storage that's dedicated to office type users. So you're not going to have like college students wheeling in couches and that type of thing. And as long as it's not flashing lights like Fred Storage and painted orange and that, it's like there's a significant difference. And I think from a master plan perspective, you can make a strong argument that this facility is supporting the office research users in the area. So it's actually consistent with the master plan.
Without a doubt, and that's how we saw it as well. There's like a self-storage desert on Stevenson all the way up and down, so it doesn't exist. And even across the freeway, there was another one that was proposed, and we're sort of piggybacking on their study. They didn't end up buying the building because of other issues, but it was at John R. and 14 Mile. So even all the way out there, there's definitely a lot of demand. So there's actually a ton of demand. So.
Any other questions from the commissioners? I just have one quick question, more of a procedure. What you've seen with your own challenge with your existing building is almost like the canary in the mine shaft, in that I'm wondering if other buildings in that zone there are going to be encountering similar issues. And from a procedural issue, and this more for a question for the members of the commission, but also just for your consideration, is that rather than going through a plan unit development, just amending the zoning ordinance so that it would allow more flexibility for building owners like yourself. Do you have a concern with that, or just as long as you're able to do what you need to do to stay profitable?
I think that's one of the things we talked about from the get-go. I would like to, maybe huddle up with my team and planning to talk more about that. But whatever is the path of least resistance is fine with me, I suppose. But, but I will tell you, just to add to what you're saying, my own little anecdote. I just had a conversation with one of my commercial broker friends, and he happens to be a receiver, special servicer for a lot of the lenders out there, and he's saying that they're seeing a bunch of offices coming up pretty soon. So it's coming. It is coming. So this is one example. We got hit just before COVID, but I think there are so many offices that just aren't seeing the kind of traffic that they once saw, and I think it's going to get a little ugly before it gets better. So,
great,
whatever it's worth.
Mr. Savinant.
So this is what they want conceptually, and we talked about this really informally. There's three ways to get there. One is through PUD. Again, because RC is very narrowly kind of focused. One is the PUD where their application is for this site alone. Another would be a text amendment where we make amendments to the RC district. Now that would apply to all property zone RC throughout the city. And there's like three pockets of it. There's a little bit north of here, then in North Troy. That's kind of the three pockets of RC. So then the discussion becomes is it appropriate everywhere throughout RC? So we'd have to dig into that and make sure that it was appropriate. That would involve Planning Commission coming up with proposed language, and then going before City Council for the amendment, and then when that happens, then the applicant would have to come back before you for a site plan. So that's a number of steps. From their perspective, it's one project because it's a Planning Commission public hearing and a City Council public hearing. So from a time standpoint, they're probably, that seems attractive. The third option is to rezone this to like IB, which permits all those uses. You see the zoning map is here. So IB, integrated industrial, is across Stevenson. This is IB, and there's some across 75. The question then becomes, is it appropriate to rezone that one piece to IB and open up the range of uses, that area? What they could do is submit a conditional rezoning to kind of really clearly show what they want to do, and they could make the argument that those uses are really strongly related to the goals of the RC district. So the conditional rezoning is the third option. Which one's best? Well, we talked very briefly when we met. I think they approached us with a concept, and their thought was PUD. And we thought, well, this is what you want to do. Let's take it before the Planning Commission and get their feedback. And then if they don't feel like it's an appropriate process, then we'll talk about it, and they'll advise you otherwise. And I haven't heard from the Planning Commission that this is a bad idea. So, I mean, and I hear what you're saying about we're going to have to deal with the fallout of COVID. We have the underlying zoning, the underlying land use classification, smart zone, kind of contemplates this. It talks about office research type uses and supporting type uses. And so it already kind of permits us to get into the zoning ordinance amendment process if you wanted to, and we're going to have to look at that here in the near future. But we went forward with a PUD concept drawing because that's what was proposed. It seemed like a good idea, and it sounds like for the most part there's support for taking this approach.
I agree. It sounds like generally, it sounds like a good plan based upon some of the input from the commissioners here, and maybe what we need is a dual approach. Is while you move forward with your PUD, we can, after we get their neighborhood nodes out of the way, is to look at some changes to the RC zoning. Any other comments for the petitioners?
Just maybe one
Go ahead.
comment. So yeah, I agree with you, and Mr. Savin, and thank you for the clarification. It seems like the PUD will be the right approach, and it seems like functionally we feel like that's the right way. Thing that we need to worry about is the aesthetic part, because when you talk about storage, we get worried because we have a couple of bad examples. So I think somehow, Mr. Savin, and I don't know how we can, have that part conform, like the aesthetic part, that with this building that you probably don't want to spend a whole lot of money, but then others can be matched so that it looks like one planned unit, not like independently put together some work area that's the one story and the brewery. So that's something I would like to see. And obviously there are certain things, because I'm a mechanical engineer, I know that when you talk about cold storage and all these things, there could be all kinds of air handling unit that can come out, stick out. That will not be acceptable from our side. Right. The building outside integrity has to remain. That's basically one of the major things. Because when I was driving by, I saw it really looked like a campus, right? All this 500, 700, 750, going on both sides. It looked really nice. So addition of a brewery would be good, because there will be some crowd, and there will be also good health for for the employees, the remaining employees who are still going to be working from work, so I think that's a good idea. But the only final thing is the aesthetic part, and overall thing has to be executed in such a way that it felt like it's a one piece. That's basically what I like to confirm. Thanks.
And we agree with you, and we hope you'll help us out.
Mr. Savin, did you have something you wanted to add or not?
No, I was just going to say that I guess I do have something to add. So our PUD process is a two-step process. The first step is submission of a concept development plan that has a planning commission public hearing, and then a city council public hearing, and then the next step is a detailed site plan that has a planning commission public hearing and a city council public hearing. We have in the past allowed applicants to combine those two. So if the applicant is 100% certain of what they want to propose, they can bundle those two processes together and get both approvals concurrently. So that's what they indicated they wanted to do, because I use air quotes, only 2 new buildings. Obviously it's a significant investment, but as PUDs go, it's not the most complicated PUD that we've seen. So we can expect that if this has traction and they like what they've heard tonight, that they'll bundle those two together into one application. So it'll be one public hearing, a planning commission, then one public hearing, a city council.
Sounds good. You have enough direction from what we're looking for here? Great. Good.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All your comments and feedback.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks for your time and for your investment too. All right, next on the agenda is application to delist 54 East Square Lake. I don't know who's going to cover that. Mr. Savin.
All right. City of Troy has a historic preservation ordinance. It's Chapter 13 of the City Code of Ordinances. It lists all of the historic resources in the City of Troy. And each each individual property is a standalone historic district. That's the way that our ordinance handles it. And there are regulations that apply to historic properties. The owner of the historic property is very limited in terms of what can be done to that historic resource. So as an example, if it's a historic home that's 150 years old and the owner decides they want to swap out the windows, we have to make sure that the windows are historically accurate, as an example. Or even if they want to, paint the house, there are paint colors that were appropriate at the time that the house is built that we would like them to adhere to. So there is some burden associated with owning a historic resource because you're limited in terms of what you can do to that resource. If one does want to make changes to a historic building, they go before the Historic District Commission for review and approval. If an applicant wishes to remove the historic designation of the property, the board they go in front of is the Historic District Study Committee. In this case, for 54 East Square Lake, they seek delisting, and they seek to remove the historic designation of the property. The way the process works in Troy is a report is prepared, goes before the Historic District Study Committee for review and recommendation. Then it goes before City Council to notify them of the application. And then a copy of the report is sent to the State Historic Preservation Office. They have a minimum of 60 days to review it. They prepare a recommendation, provide it to us. Then there's another meeting of the Historic District Study Committee. It also has to go before the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission may make a resolution of support, recommending support or recommending denial, or they may choose to take no action. It's really up to the Planning Commission. And after that, it goes before City Council for approval or denial. So that's the process. In this instance, so brief history. I talked about this briefly before the meeting with the chairman and vice chair. When we got the application for this property, I went to check the file to see what we had in the file. There was no file. So there was no justification for why it was deemed historic in the first place. So what I did is I talked to the applicant and I said, we don't have the time or the expertise to prepare the report. So if you're willing, if you submit an escrow deposit, we'll hire a expert to prepare the report. So he was willing to do that. Quoted us. I got a quote from the architectural historian. They paid the fees. They were acting as an independent expert, and they prepared the report that you've got in your file. The company's name is 313 Historic Preservation, and the person's name is Don Billebrand, who grew up in Troy and knows Troy very well. So that was an added bonus. So that's kind of trying to summarize the process and kind of explain how we got to where we did. I'm not going to go over every word of this report. I'm just going to highlight some of the important information. So it's a 1.5-story building with a side gable roof and projecting eaves. It's constructed on a raised foundation of rusticated concrete block. The facade is embellished with English Tudor Revival elements to elevate the bungalow-style building. There are no records in the Troy Historic Commission archives to indicate the year built, the architect, the builder, or the original owner for 54 East Square Lake Road. It's estimated the building was constructed between 1910 and 1915. And the city assessor records assigned 1915 as the year that it was constructed. The property is designated as an individual historic district under the City of Troy Chapter 13. As I indicated, they're all the districts are individual properties. A review of building records, Troy Historical Commission designation and survey files, and Troy Historic Village archives revealed no information regarding the individual significance, original owner, or year built for 54 East Square Lake Road. The listing criteria was most likely only established due to the building's age exceeding the 50-year historic designation threshold at time of survey. While 54 East Square Lake Road does demonstrate the bungalow architectural style, it does not prove significant construction methods or level of workmanship, nor a connection to an important person or event. There's no information regarding an architect or builder in historic records. Original materials and configurations have been replaced and altered over time, including replacement vinyl windows, new entries, new porch railings, and stairs. While the individual historic district is identifiable as a historic building, it does not convey a particular sense of time or significance due to the alteration of the materials and setting. Now, this report, as I indicated, was sent to the State Historic Preservation Office. They disagreed with those findings, and they indicated that what should have happened was a deeper dive into who owned the property over time. They suggested that research should have been conducted at the Oakland County Register of Deeds. That was not conducted, in part because the Register of Deeds has been closed since the pandemic. So that is the reason why that extra step was not taken. And that summarizes the report. There's a lot of information here. Again, the planning, I can answer any questions. I didn't prepare the document, but I'm processing the application, and the Planning Commission can recommend approval, recommend denial, or take no action at all.
Any questions for Mr. Savina? Yes, Ms. Parakis.
I have a question about the zoning. What is it seems like it's for sale, so my question is whether it's wanting to be delisted because it makes it easier to sell and then probably be demolished, and then I'm wondering if we find it in the neighborhood node.
So it is zone neighborhood node, and I can only tell you what the applicant told us at the first meeting of the Historic District Study Committee. The applicant indicated he had no plans to demolish it, but he wanted flexibility to make renovations to the building. But again, that's non-binding.
Right.
There's no, there's no requirement that he not demolish the building if it's delisted.
And it's currently a commercial building?
Yeah, it's
They're selling something out of there, or?
Yeah, it's had a commercial history for about the last about 50 years. It's been used for various uses. It's interesting if you look at the aerial. It's really close to the right of way. It's when this was built in 1915. My guess is Square Lake was a two-lane maybe two-lane gravel road, and it's been widened over time. So it's been inching closer and closer to the right of way.
Okay, and then my only other comment would be that this is the second one that we've had. We had the other one, I think, in the same area. And as a starting point, I guess I would say that there's certain rules that are set forth in the ordinance of what they need to follow in order to get a property delisted. And they didn't follow those steps according to the state. And so I don't feel prepared at this time to make a resolution one way or the other without those steps having been taken. I also have to say I'm concerned about the fact that we get these in front of us and they say, well, they're not historic because there have been so many changes to the building. But how are these changes happening? It's almost like changes are happening and then they come and say, see, look, we're not historic anymore and we're destroying historic buildings. It's possible that it was listed in the first place when it shouldn't have. I understand that. But without doing a little bit of digging, which can be done with a deed search, I wouldn't be prepared to make a recommendation one way or the other to City Council. I get that the Office of Deeds has been closed, but then maybe the timing's just not right for this. That's my thought.
Any more? Yes, Mr. Faison.
I echo Ms. Parakis' second comment. I was curious too, like, how were these changes made to a historic building? And Brett, I'm guessing you don't know the answer to that question, but it just seems like it comes to us as it's no longer historic because there's been so many modifications. And I'm thinking of also a building, not the flower shop, but one on Crooks Road near Bowling Park, where we had the similar thing. That's probably 4 or 5 years ago, where the inside was changed so significantly that we delisted it.
I wish that we had the records on file that I could answer your questions. I can't.
I got it. I understand.
I can tell you that we use a program called BSNA where we use it to route development applications through the city. And for every historic resource, when we get for example, get a building permit for 54 East Square Lake, you plug in the address in the program, and then the property pops up, and there's a red banner along the top that says, "This is a historic resource. Do not do anything until you talk to me," so that I can check the file, I can process the application. So we do what we can to protect the resources that we have at this point in time, but what happened to it before, I have no idea when changes were made, how they coincided with the timing of when it was listed. I don't know.
Yes, Ms. Malahawi.
Couple comments and questions, so bear with me here. The very first thing is that is a very interesting neighborhood node. I'm sure during your walks you may have seen that. We have the fairly new condo construction. We have a Troy Corners, which has a strip mall with pretty active businesses there. Then you have this side of the street, which is very close to where I live, where you have 2 homes which are right on the street. And it always has bothered me, for the safety of the people who are walking or even standing, because their mailbox is literally on the road. And I got to know about the fact that this area has been mentioned as a historic area, so preservation is key. But with the growing population and with the traffic flow into Smith Middle School, that is the popular route for many parents when they're dropping their kids and school buses, gosh, those 2 homes that sit right at the intersection of Livernois and Square Lake, I understand, I'm a student of history, Ms. Barakis, and I love to preserve anything old as much as possible. But I don't know about these locations as so much. I understand they're not dismantling it. There have been few businesses since I've moved into that area. There was a State Farm agent who was working off of that location. And I take it not everybody has there's no great parking in that area because it's a residence converted into commercial. So it's a big challenge for me to preserve that kind of a historical location, just because of the way it is functioning in that area. But that being said, of course, when I saw the building and I was walking around after I got to know that this has been this has been mentioned as a historic district, I was like, it looks pretty modern. You have vinyl siding, you have vinyl windows. What gives it that historical character? Maybe something is inside, because if it was built in 1915, I was very curious about this house. I read every word that was mentioned in the report. And probably there is something in there. I don't know what is. Probably there is something in there if it's 1915, so that's more than 100 years old. It tempts me to preserve it, but at the same time, I'm looking at the potential of what it will be, as there is no front yard. There is only this much of a strip of grass. In fact, that is something that they can't even maintain. It's a very, very difficult area to not think in terms of how the area is growing. So my only question to you, Mr. Savidant, is on the lines of Mr. Faison. We don't know, of course, when those changes happened, why the updates were done to the home. And now with the current petition in front of us, they are also looking to make more changes, correct? So the integrity or the historical integrity of that area, that house, of that building is going to go away if they were to do more changes to the structure.
Potentially, but keep in mind that the historic preservation standards do not apply to the interior. So in theory, there could be a historic resource that's completely gutted inside. As long as the outside remains historically significant, that would be permitted.
What is historically significant about the building on the exterior? It has very modern well, I won't say it's 2022 construction, but definitely it's not 1915 or 1950 construction
Well,
either.
the report would agree with what you just said.
Right. So it's big, so that's where my dilemma
But,
is.
yeah, so in the report, there's a list of some of the changes that were made in years, but it doesn't get into the historic impact so much of what was done, so it's hard to make a determination. But I think that's Ms. Parakis' point was, you know, it would be advantageous to us if we knew exactly when the changes were made, what changes were made, what was the historic significance of the, what was the significance architecturally on the building, that type of thing, and we just don't have those records.
How would you get those? Now, if we were to postpone this so we get some more information so we can make an informed decision here as a group, how would you get those details? What would be the process you would follow?
Well, what she did was she came to City Hall and pulled all the building permit records that she could find. And at the time, apparently, either the home wasn't listed when the improvements were made, or there wasn't good housekeeping and there wasn't good, good tracking of the fact that it was historic and they were done inconsistent with the historic standards. I don't know. Based on the information we have, everything was appropriately permitted.
Any idea when the state's deed office will be opened for this to move forward?
I don't know.
Thank you.
Just keep in mind, too, and I'll call Mr. Beekner next, is that we don't have to take any action if we're not sure. So, Mr. Beekner.
My 2 cents on this, I agree with what everybody said. I think the deeds, if it's not open, it's going to be open soon, as my understanding. I think we need more information on it. I'm curious. As soon as this sells, you lose a whole nother list of history that someone owned this for a long time. So I think we're leaning towards going in that direction, but I'd like to know more details before I would vote on it. I would not vote on it for right now.
Yes, Mr. Faison.
What's the effect of taking no action?
I think the effect is that we're not entered into the formal record of taking a position one way or the other. I would believe that's how it'd be handled, so.
Yeah, I should have mentioned.
To City Council?
No, I should have. So I talked about the process, and what I didn't give you was the date. There is a meeting scheduled of the Historic District Study Committee for next Monday, the 28th. So if the Planning Commission made a motion this evening, the minutes of the meeting would be forwarded to them. If the Planning Commission takes no action, I'll just tell them that the Planning Commission took no action. And when they'll make a recommendation, they're required to make a recommendation, and when it goes before City Council, the memo that goes before City Council will say, this went to Planning Commission on the 22nd of March, they took no action.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Krent.
2 things. One, the historic look is, to me, is not accurate to something that was built in 1915 as far as materials. And again, the purview of the historic thing is on the exterior. It doesn't involve the interior. I'm all in favor of just saying, yeah, delist it. It doesn't look accurate to 1915 or even close. But that said, since the Historic Commission is going to be looking at this and maybe they have some insight that we don't have, I'd be, postponing it or make no action tonight and then just let them carry on, and maybe the Office of the Deeds will open up one of these days when they think COVID's over and go from there.
Yes, Ms. Parakis.
I mean, I appreciate what everyone said. I guess I think that now that I'm giving it a little bit more thought, maybe not taking any action is just sending a message that we're punting on it. And I think that what I'm really saying is I think that we should get the deed. The reason for it is, what if we find out, as you kind of mentioned, what if we found out that somebody really famous owned the house? And that's what gave it historical significance, and in the meantime, we've demolished it. Also, that particular note is going to be looked at, and one of the things that we heard in terms of feedback from residents was they wanted to maintain the historical feel of the area. and we're going to go and demolish it, and then we lose all control the way it's currently zoned right now, because you can go put a 7-Eleven there essentially. So personally, I would say that I would probably tonight propose a resolution that we are not in favor of delisting or postponing a recommendation until we have further information, and we believe that the deed, you know, there are certain steps that they should follow, and obtaining the deed is one of them. And I don't really think that us driving by and looking at it and deciding that it's doesn't look historical really meets the criteria, and I don't think we should base a decision on that.
Before we consider any kind of motion, do we need to have an official public hearing? No? Okay. Well, the last person who could have commented is gone anyway, so. Yes, Ms. Malala. Oh, Mr. Hudson, you haven't had a chance to speak yet. So.
I think as a deed is a fall guy. Going back to 1915, you know, this was a country cornfield in a township, a huge one. If you find a deed going back to 1915, which I doubt you can do, it's going to give the name to somebody, some farmer. Who owned it. I just don't think that we ought to hold this up because we've got to go to the Register of Deeds office and scour the records if they're there, and I doubt they're there, but I think doing nothing's not going to harm anybody.
Yes, Ms. Peratt.
I mean, 2 weeks ago, we asked an applicant to go back and come back with 3D renderings because that was the process. So if we're going to maintain the integrity of the process, for me, I think it's important that we follow the statute.
No, and I voted no on that.
I'm sorry?
I voted no on
that, yes.
Yeah, I remember. Good call.
So
Yes,
if I
Ms.
could just
Oh, go ahead, Ms. Dufresne.
There's really nothing to postpone here, if I may interject. There's not really any requirement that Planning Commission make a recommendation one way or the other. I guess I would suggest if you want to make a recommendation in your resolution to the Historic District Committee to do the legwork, that's one way to proceed, but postponing this action, it doesn't need to come back to this body. So I think postponement's not really a proper way to proceed.
So does somebody want to make a resolution, or Ms.
Can
Malala?
I have my last question? Yeah.
Let Ms. Malala go.
Just a quick refreshing of my memory. The flower barn, why did we err on the side of giving them the ability to delist it? What was our reasoning? I'm not able to remember my thinking, because it also is in the same area. So we gave them the ability to delist, not that these people should, or this particular petitioner shouldn't. I just was curious. I tried to remember our reasons. If somebody can refresh my memory as to how we went on that.
I do remember the petitioner was actually here and answered our questions, so there was, I think, that aspect of it. But Mr. Savin, did you want to add anything onto that?
Yeah, basically, it was this strange, perfect storm where I've processed, I don't know, 6 or 7 of these delisting applications in the last decade or so, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, there was no file for either one of these the last 2 properties, the Eel Flower Barn or 54 East Square Lake. Eel Flower Barn is in the northwest quadrant, just out of the frame here. The study showed that that there was really no. It couldn't be justified why it was listed in the first place. There was no one. It was not architecturally significant. There was no one who historically owned the property or lived there that we knew of, that the records indicated, and it was kind of flawed reasoning why it was old, but it wasn't historic. And even the historic barn, when you went in there and you looked at this huge beam, it's like, wow, this is a historic barn, but the owners indicated that if you look at it, the beam wasn't a support beam, and he said they purchased it from a property in Bloomfield Township in like 1982 or something like that. So it was old but not historic, and the Planning Commission recommended delisting. Now I will say, when I first started on in the planning department 20 years ago, the planning commission spent about 3 seconds discussing these and just said, we don't care. That was the kind of the culture then. This planning commission, which is a good thing, I want to be clear, is a good thing, spends more time in these applications.
Any preference anyone wants to make a resolution, or do we just want to say we, yes, Mr. Krent? Go ahead.
Forget, do nothing.
Okay.
It's no action.
Is it general consensus then? Okay. We're taking no action then.
Duly noted.
Okay. All right, next on the agenda is public comments for items on the agenda. No one is present, so we can quickly dispense with that. Next is Planning Commission comment. I'll start down with Mrs. Arnecki. She never gets a chance to talk. Do you have anything you want to share with us?
Thank you, Chair. No, I have nothing.
Okay. Mr. Beekner? This is our opportunity for you want to say anything related to Planning Commission, so nothing? All right.
Good.
Okay.
No, I think I've spoken enough.
I would like to say, I think my concern of the difficulty of the storehouse, warehouse, whatever it is, has been assuaged by the comments of my fellow commissioners concerning its camouflage, and that makes a big difference to me. So I guess I'm sort of in favor of it.
Mr. Faison?
Welcome to Mr. Beekner. He's our new planning commissioner. That's all I have.
Okay. Mr. Krent?
Ditto. Good you're aboard.
Ms. Parakis?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Welcome.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes, I welcome you also.
Ms. Dufresne?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Mr. Savinant?
Two things. Those of you who watched the city council meeting not last night, but 8 days ago, would have seen that the Pineview condominium conditional rezoning for 25 units at the northwest, just northwest of the intersection of Long Lake and DeQuinder was approved by city council. And we have scheduled 3 subcommittee meetings with the subcommittee to talk about neighborhood nodes. They're scheduled for those in the residents who want to attend. They're scheduled for April 5th, April 13th, April 27th. They're all to be start at 6 p.m. in council chambers. The public is invited. Planning Commission is not invited because, remember, a quorum is 5, and the subcommittee is of 4. So residents can come and observe, but Planning Commission cannot. But everything, any recommendations, we're not taking any specific action as a subcommittee, but any recommendations will come before the Planning Commission at a public meeting. So you'll be appraised of everything that the subcommittee comes up with.
No problem.
Will those meetings be either broadcast or taped for later watching?
No.
Okay.
No, but it'll be open to the public.
Okay. I was just thinking for the benefit of the commissioners, other commissioners. Okay. Mr. Carlisle, anything from you?
Do you have a follow-up, Mr. Faison?
I just had a question. So the public will be invited to those. Will it be like an open forum for the public to comment and give input?
So I can start, and if I make if I misspeak, so there'll be a kind of a typical agenda where there'll be opportunity for the public to comment for items that are not on the agenda at the beginning of the meeting and for items that are on the agenda at the end of the meeting. Otherwise, it's not a back and forth with the public. Again, they can participate, they can listen, and at the end, they'll be given an opportunity to speak, just like a typical meeting.
All right, thank you.
I think what Mr. Savinant means by invited is that it'll be noticed as a typical open meeting. That's all, right?
Yes, yes.
There aren't invitations
Yeah, we're not sending invitations to 85,000 people, no. But it'll be noticed. It's already on
the open invitation.
It's already on the board at the clerk's office. It's in the calendar on the website, and the public meeting.
Mr. Carlisle, anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to, for those who may or may not know, we had a node tour with the council on March 12th, I believe it was Saturday. I was there, Director Savinant was there, Ms. Dufresne was there, as well as all the members of the council, Mark Miller, Bob Bruner, and Lori. Is there anyone else I missed? I think that's everyone. It was it went very well. We've toured 3 nodes, the ones we discussed earlier. Not surprisingly, the comments from the Planning Commission, or from the council, were very similar, if not echoed exactly what the Planning Commission's comments were. And so I think we have good direction moving forward, and we'll share those results and share them with the planning commission as a whole, but also share them with the subcommittee as we move forward.
Thank you. And all I have to say is welcome Mr. Beekner to the Planning Commission. Thank you. All right, and with that, we are adjourned.